So actually, a very interesting story how this came about, right? So I had sold my company in June of 2012.
Right.
And when you grow up middle class, probably the only goal you have is to make a little bit of money. And then what happens is that you make your money and you think that will be the panacea for all evil, the silver bullet to life, and everything will be hunky dory. And I was brought suddenly into this thing where my father was on the ventilator in about 9 months after that incident of
Oh,
selling the company.
wow. Wow.
And 7 8 days I was Asian Heart Hospital, and you have this sort of contemplating, inward looking moment that there is nothing much money can do, and it's not as powerful as you thought it would be. And what should be my purpose in life? What should be my goal in life? So it was almost started from there, or 8 9 years ago. And I said, okay, I want to have a simple purpose. I want to increase the joy and happiness in my life every minute, every hour, rest of my
Yep.
life. My purpose. So if there is something called nirvana, I
Yep.
want to achieve nirvana through increasing my joy.
Yeah.
Then the more I researched, I realized that everybody has this baseline of happiness. So most entrepreneurs are positive guys, so we'll be probably 80s or 100s. But the fact of the matter is, if we break our leg or we win a lottery, we'll go to 90 but come back to 80. Or COVID-19 happens, we come back to 60, but we'll come back to 80, right? So after 3 4 months, 6 months, whatever the duration is, depending on how big the curveball came in your life, you'll come back to your baseline. So what if you could treat that baseline like a muscle and work on increasing that 80 to 81, 82? And what are the things that you do? So I started researching it, and everything, all the books that I found, all the TED Talks that I saw were all focusing on these chemicals.
Yeah.
Where dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, endorphins, exercise karo, meditate karo, spend time with friends, etc. Which all obviously is, people who exercise will be happier than people who don't exercise. People
Yeah.
who spend time with friends will be happier than people who are lonely. But what I found missing was this whole thing of combining it with mental model of people. And I think what sustains happiness is these framework that we have in our lives, right? It's almost like a mental model framework, whatever you would call it. And that's what sustains happiness, right? Because we are happy not because we exercised alone, right? When we take decisions, we'll take a decision which which basically will give us long-term happiness. So we may decide, like I was asking this guy, one of the Dentsu guys who acquired 35 40 companies. So he said that, I said, like, how do you acquire so many companies? He says, Vivek, I have a simple philosophy where I go into the office and spend time with the team. If everybody around me looks happy, then we look at the numbers. If they don't look happy, then I don't even look at the numbers. So I said, like, dude, it's like you're spending tens of millions of dollars based on if you feel people are happy or not. So I said, okay. And I'm up to something here where I think a lot of times it's almost like there is a book which says that happiness brings you success rather than success bringing you happiness. So overall, I said, okay, this is an interesting thing that I want to connect. It's almost like a Jim Collins flywheel, right? You want to connect the
Yeah.
one side of it, which is the happiness chemical, short-term things like meditation, sleep, things like exercise. But on the other side, create these mental model frameworks. Like I have some models which is like I trust everyone as one of my mental models. The other model I'll have is 4x about money, right? That everything I upgrade in my life is 4x or I keep what I have. So either if I can't afford a 4x, I have to be patient. But everything in my life, either I upgrade it 4x, otherwise I don't upgrade it at all. Experiences other than material things. So what I thought was that when I talk to entrepreneurs and talk to a few people, I realize that it's the mental model that makes them successful, but mental model that keeps them happy. So what I want to discover in this talk that we do is, obviously we'll cover that, okay, do you exercise and what are the things you do, but a little bit less on the focus on the short term parts of the thing, but more on the mental makeup. So I'll give you an example what Vishal Gundal shared, right? He said that everybody, I look at myself as I'm a version of a product. So let's say I'm iPhone 11 Pro right now. अब iPhone 12 जब आएगा उसमें क्या फीचर्स होने चाहिए. So what have I done to myself in the next 6 months, 1 year, that I deserve the next model? So how have I improved myself that keeps me motivated on self-improvement all my life. That I can't be Vishal Gundal 11 today and then next year I'm Vishal Gundal 11.25. I don't need to be 12. I need to be 13. I need to create something path-breaking in myself. So I said that, this is a very interesting mental model, right? Because by God's grace, all of us have a little bit of money. So voluntary motivation actually, as per the research they've done, it's up to $75,000. It keeps on increasing your happiness. Once you cross $75,000 a year as income, using purchase parity, then the diminishing marginality sets in, right? And this book is going to be mainly consumed by people who are earning more than that. So people who have physical needs of Maslow, I don't think I can make them happier. So, but hopefully the others, I can help them become happier. Right. So this is the context and background. In fact, it almost summarizes what the book is about. And
great initiative, man, Vivek. I think it's wonderful that you're doing this, and you've taken on a big question. I think you've taken on an existential question, which is fundamentally at the center or core of everybody's existence. There is no bigger question than this. So I don't know if you can answer that in one book. If you do, then and that's great. But I'm assuming that more than an answer, it's perhaps the first step of a long journey for you personally and for your readers. And I think that's important to keep in mind, at least for me, when I talk about this.
In fact, I've got a ghostwriter who's helping me write the book.
Gotcha.
So, say every week we do a 90-minute Zoom call. Then she transcribes our conversations. And she asked me, what is the purpose of the book, right? And I said, see, listen, my purpose is very simple. I know X about happiness right now. In 3 months' time, when the book gets over, if my knowledge of happiness goes from X to 2X, and if just that itself is good enough purpose for me, right? So I'm not doing it for anybody. It's like a compass. Hopefully somebody gets some value and gets some right direction from it. But my purpose is self-journey, right? Because every conversation I have with a person like you or Vishal or Rajesh Jain, any of these people, right? I'm learning through the process of writing the book. So they say, if you want to learn something, try to teach it, right? So automatically,
teaching is the best form of learning. So absolutely.
Okay. So let me start off.
Well, let me. I mean, are you gonna just in terms of the recording? Are you gonna edit it to make it available so we can say other random stuff which you can edit out later? Or?
You know what I was thinking? Anupam,
I was gonna ask you, how much do you pay a ghostwriter?
Yeah. So Sally, what my thinking is, right? My thinking is that I think the full interview, right? I'm going to publish it in any case, because it's a 90-minute long format interviews like Tim Ferriss kind of stuff, right? So we can have a conversation. Somebody wants to see it. Somebody wants to learn from it. There should be no problems in having that conversation. Wherever you feel you want to ask me a question, if I feel I can answer it online, I'll answer it. Otherwise, I'll send it to you by WhatsApp. But the interview, the whole thing I'm going to, because otherwise it's going to become too much effort of editing it. But what I'm going to eventually do is, I'm going to create question answers from these interviews and make them in these bite-sized 2-minute, 3-minute things. Like that whole thing about, when Vishal mentioned about this product thing, or Rajesh Jain talked about like purpose. And, he said like, Andrew Carnegie and all these people built up these libraries. They left institutions behind, right? So now that I found very interesting, that how do you actually have a slightly, like my CSR is table tennis, but can I leave something behind in table tennis, which becomes an institution, right? That requires 100 crores to be set aside for that purpose, because it has to fund itself thereafter. So those kind of things, I'll make them into bite-sized chunks, which can be Q&A kind of a thing on Instagram or YouTube or whatever. But yeah, one whole recording as it is, it's probably going to go live.
Just give me a second. You said 90 minutes, so I'm moving something because I had scheduled only an hour.
Okay. No, but we could be done in an hour also.
No, but I don't want to put pressure on myself and you.
Again. Okay, so Anupam, let me just start off with some of the mental models that you have in terms of, because I think all of us, to be angel investors or entrepreneurs, have to be very positive people. So first thing I'll start off with you was, if you had to rate yourself on happiness on 0 to 100, right? Where would you be?
Yeah, look, I think it's very important, firstly, to try to establish the meaning of these terms before one tries to rate themselves, right? Because interpretations and definitions I find are tricky. What you call happiness, I may have a very different interpretation of that term. So, if I had to be perfectly honest, uh, I think what you're calling happiness, perhaps if I'm interpreting as uh, maybe momentary joy, if that's what you mean by happiness, how often do I feel momentary joy in the day, right? That's very different from uh, how calm and serene do you feel all day, right? And I think these are very two different feelings. And so if you ask me as an entrepreneur, you were saying, we need to be happy, or most entrepreneurs are happy. I don't actually agree with that. I think most entrepreneurs are maybe optimistic, but not necessarily happy. And again, it comes down to definitions and how you describe it, right? In fact, entrepreneurship is so tough that your momentary joys, you can go weeks without having momentary joys because you're aggravated and frustrated trying to do something. I know you've experienced it, I experience it all the time. Right? Calmness, blissfulness, all of that goes out of the window for long periods of time. But the sense of purpose maybe overrides some of that. And so you can still go back and say, no, it felt good. Although I wouldn't then describe that as happiness. So, so I think it comes down to that. So let me try to break it a little further in terms of the question you asked me. I think when it comes to optimism, long-term optimism, I would give myself above the 90, close to 100. Right? So I have an unshakable belief that in the end, everything will be okay. Now, where that comes from, you can call it conditioning, philosophy, parenting, genes. I don't know what you want to call it. I cannot explain it. I just have that unshakable belief that in the long term, everything will be okay. So on that vector, I would give myself above 90. Now, if you ask me on a day-to-day basis, are you extremely optimistic? No, I would give myself on that vector less than 50. Right? I'm constantly worried that something will go wrong, that I'm not in full control. I haven't thought this through. So there's a lot of fear and anxiety that is consistently and constantly playing in my mind, which is much better now than it was a few years back. So on that vector, I would give it much lower than 50. Right? So the question comes back to you, right? Given what I just told you, how would you then say Anupam is this number on this scale?
I think the way I look at it now, again, no easier to define it, right? And there is happiness, there is pleasure, there is some things that give you momentary aspects of joy, something that gives you calm, serenity, whatever, X, Y, Z, right? But we just take, on a very crude form, a lot of happiness is to do with chemicals, right? So you have these short-term chemicals, which is the dopamine and endorphins, which give you that momentary joy, produces those chemicals. And there are slightly long-term chemicals, oxytocin, serotonin kind of chemicals that give you slightly, serotonin is produced when you meditate, right? Oxytocin is produced when you are in this comfortable, trusted relationship.
Love chemical.
Yeah, love chemical, right? So, and it also is used in different ways. So you paid for, you see somebody doing some good, it produces oxytocin for that person, but it's also for you, right? Because you saw, as a reason, some of these videos you forward to each other that paid for videos, right? So
there's also a bliss chemical.
Yeah, what is
Beyond
that?
oxytocin, serotonin, endorphins, there's a bliss chemical.
Okay.
It's called, and very interestingly, the etymology, it has its roots in Sanskrit.
Wow.
So it's
Fine.
called Anandamide.
Oh, wow.
It is the same, it behaves very much like when you smoke marijuana.
Oh,
So it attaches. So, I don't know if you know this, but human beings have a marijuana receptor, a cannabinoid receptor in our brains. Right? So anandamide pretty much acts in the same way. It attaches itself to those cannabinoid receptors and gives you a feeling of blissfulness.
wow. I didn't know this. This is good learning for me. So, unfortunately, a lot of Western books on happiness don't seem to cover this as yet. So, I'm going to take your cue and read up a little bit on it. So, at least. So the way I look at it is, right. Uh, I think even just the concept of mindfulness, right? If Even if you're going through stress right now, or we are going through something, and we are mindful of that at this moment of time, it produces some kind of calmness. Even like, uh, I'm doing this decision making course by Shane Parrish on decision by design, and it's just 12 weeks, one video 1 week, and it's just phenomenal. Means I think the mental model that it tells you about decision making, it becomes so much simpler that I think it adds to happiness. So I think there is no easy way to define it, as you said, Anupam, but I feel that if I look at it from just the chemicals point of view, generally people who have more of oxytocin, more of serotonin, more of endorphins, more of dopamine in their life are generally happier than people who don't. So that's the way I would that. But I think you're right that from a long-term point of view, it seems that okay, you're going to be sorted, right? So like
Yeah.
optimistic, positive, whatever you would call it, right? And I had also when I
Point.
entrepreneurs, I'd use positivity as a feature, not just plain happiness, right? Because so sometimes what happens is, right, uh, they actually have a TED talk on what makes you happier as per your parents' advice. And they said, okay, get a job, get married, have kids. And this is the first two is proven. People who have jobs, people who are married are happier than people who do not. But kids is a very different thing, right? He says kids give you this joy moments which are worth a lifetime a few times in 20 years. But if you take individually on a day-to-day basis, right, it's a very stressful thing. So the more and more effort we put into something, the more and more.
I have a slightly different view on the kids part. Let me explain to you. This is my own experience. I had a child very late in my life. And, people kept asking me, how does it feel? And I kept wondering. Uh, I didn't want to give a, sort of superficial answer like it feels great and it feels fulfilling. So I thought about it a lot. And I think, what kids do is they create a feeling that is very hard to otherwise experience. Uh, Let me try to put that in context a little bit. So when I was a child, I remember even today, I must have seen a snail for the first time. I may have been 3 years old. I don't remember exactly what my age was. And I was at some park. I don't remember where. And I watched the snail with wonder for what seemed like a lifetime. Maybe it was 10 minutes, maybe it was 15 minutes, maybe it was 20 minutes. I don't remember now. But I watched every movement of this snail. And I was in amazement and in wonder. As you get older, my view is because we start taking things for granted and we get cynical and we get skeptical because of life's experiences, we lose wonder and amazement for the universe. And wonder is an amazing way to feel happy. When you have a child, you start to see the world and the universe through their eyes for some time. Right? I remember the day my child was born, the sense of wonder that came back gushing through my veins, I had not experienced in decades. That snail moment came back to me. Right? And as she gets older, sure, those moments of wonder are becoming less. But even today, there are some days I don't get them, but even now, occasionally, every now and then, sometimes there are many in a day, sometimes there are a few in a week, but I do get that sense of wonder. And the trick is, how do you try to hold on to that sense of wonder? If you can hold on to a sense of wonder, then life is blissful. But as easy as I make it sound, it's probably the hardest thing to do.
Anupam, I went for Vipassana uh, for 11 days. I had a very similar feeling after 7, 8 days of being there, that I could look at an ant for half an hour and just wonder and feel absolutely calm and peaceful, and I could without getting bored, right? So I think that for me, at least, that journey into meditation uh, has led me to, I think, basically, if we can be in the moment
Yeah.
as long as possible, right? For me, meditation is not sitting in a corner and trying to have no thoughts, but just be in this moment, right? So we are talking to each other. Can I just be in this moment and listen to you without having to worry about anything else? That itself, I think, increases that wonder to a certain extent for me, at least in my life. And to a
Yeah,
certain extent,
I agree. I think you hit the nail on the head. I was going to mention that, but since you're talking about meditation, uh, I think that's exactly what meditation is. I think one of our biggest veins as the human is our inability to be still. And we are always reacting to external stimuli. And particularly now with digital technologies and social media, we have lost all sense of stillness because we don't even look up to the sky, right, anymore. And that's why most of us have neck problems because how many times do you think that? You
yeah.
never do this. You're only doing this. Right?
So, I'll just mention one thing, Anupam, yesterday's thing, right? So I was walking in my building and said, "This beautiful sky." And a lot of people are sharing these things, right? So I was just discussing with my wife and I told her that this is like, is this common? He said, no, it's just that all of us are noticing it for the first time in our lives. So
Yeah.
he said that. I said, like, I just cracked up. I said, like, dude, it's like, sorry to have interrupted, but it's just
No,
perfect a sky moment that, we are wondering, we are looking at the sky and appreciating it and sharing it. It's like, I said, like, oh, this has been always there. It's
yeah,
probably
that's
beautiful
right.
every day, but we never actually looked at it.
Absolutely. I think great point. We just more I mean when you think about it, right? We have all these science and these tools and technologies and we are figuring out astronomy and the universe and stars and distance and so on. You look back hundreds of years back, and if you look at Vedic astrology and you look at astronomy, which comes from astronomy, it doesn't come from superstition. They had figured out the distances between planets and stars, uh, right? And climatic patterns and weather patterns and things like that. How? Simply by being perceptive and observing. Because you are not reacting to 100 different things, you could simply look at the sky and be extremely perceptive and observant and figure so much out, which we struggle with today because we are constantly reacting. So I think the point I was making is stillness, which I define really as not reacting to external stimuli, is something that I think meditation really helps with. Something that I've discovered over the last few years. And the more you do it, the more you are able to use breathing to really still your mind. And I think at some point it starts to, it's when it starts out, it's 5 minutes a day, 10 minutes a day, 20 minutes a day. But I think over time with practice, as you were pointing out, is happiness a muscle? If you just look at meditation, with practice, you learn to invoke that stillness throughout the day. Whether you want to use breathing techniques, whether you want to simply go back to contemplating the universe, whether you want to invoke humility, however you do it. Right? There are different tricks and there are different techniques. But I think it sort of starts to become part of your day. And that's when you find perhaps what you are referring to as happiness a little more, how should I say, uh, a little more of something you can carry through the day.
Yeah. In fact, most of our pain comes from either living in the past or living in the future, right? So if we can just be in the moment, it automatically leads to lesser pain for sure.
It's the hardest thing to do.
Yeah, it's
It's the hardest thing to do. It seems simple, live in the moment, right?
but somebody had asked me once, and we were having a discussion, and he said that I said that I try to spend time with more positive people. So he said like, but how do you know who's positive, who's not, right? I said people who generally talk about the past are people who, according to me, are less positive. People who generally talk about the future are people who generally more positive. So if I have to just decide if this person is positive or not, it's simpler. So he starts off with, okay, now तू बहुत बड़ा आदमी बन गया है, तेरे पास मेरे लिए टाइम नहीं है. For me, it's like ऐसे अब तो और भी टाइम नहीं मिलेगा.
Yeah, absolutely. I think people have their journeys, and I think a big part of. But it's very interesting you mentioned that, and I'll talk. Let me talk a little bit about that. Actually, that raises a very important point. I started out by saying, let's define happiness. Sustained happiness, or let's call that blissfulness. Let's separate the two terms. Let's say happiness is one term and blissfulness is another term, which is, let's say, sustained happiness for the purposes of our discussion. I think these are two very distinct, or maybe not distinct, they're overlapping, but they're certainly slightly different compartments. And the journey to achieve the two can be even contradictory. So whatever we spoke about, meditation, being around happy people, exercising, doing things you love, these to me are manipulations or techniques to fundamentally release chemicals, whether it's serotonin, dopamine, anandamide, that help you get more and more momentary joy, right? And if you do it, sleep, if you do it a lot, then at least chemically, because fundamentally what are we? We're chemicals, bag of chemicals. So if you do it correctly, at least your chemical composition is now ready or in a place for you to be able to contemplate the other compartment, which is blissfulness. If you are struggling with the fundamentals of being in the moment or being able to extract joy and happiness from your own body, right? As I said, your body already has cannabinoid receptors, and you are resorting to external cannabinoids or alcohol or various other forms of pleasure. It's going to be very hard for you to ever contemplate blissfulness. So I believe that to get to the ultimate happiness state or sustained happiness, which I call blissfulness, you need to first get the manipulation part right, so that you, at least your body, your physical composition, your chemical construct is ready to then, start doing the bigger stuff. However, the bigger stuff, or the sustained happiness or blissfulness, that actually comes from a very different place, in my view. That comes from self-awareness. And self-awareness comes from conflict and crisis. Self-awareness does not come from happiness. Self-awareness does not come from good people around you. Self-awareness comes from difficult people around you. Self-awareness comes from going through very trying times, losing everything, introspecting. And that, when combined with the techniques and tools, in my view, lead to sustained happiness.
So the way, actually, this is actually the breakthrough. The reason when I decided to write a book was actually this in a way, in my the light bulb moment in my mind,
Yeah.
that all the books have been focused on the actions, sleep, exercise, meditation, etc. Right? So they produce these chemicals. But what I realized was that it's the belief systems in the framework of how a lot of positive, happier people lead their lives is because the mental model they have, framework they have for decision making, they have these philosophies like that eventually everything's going to become all right, whatever, right? And those could have come from whatever reasons, parenting, crisis, having an opportunity to build larger companies, meet people who are more knowledgeable and wiser than you, etc. So it's almost like a flywheel, right? It's like when you look at the
Yeah.
flywheel of Collins, one improves the other. So the actions help you, form certain beliefs. The beliefs obviously make you do those actions on a day-to-day basis. And it's the combination, the flywheel, that improves the baseline of your happiness, right? So how do you go from 80 to 81? So in fact, I had given this talk called Happiness is a Muscle on TED about 4 5 years ago, one of the TEDx's, and I had only focused on the actions. The entire talk was that. So I didn't even feel that it was done to that. Everybody had covered it. There was nothing much to cover in it. It's only when I realized that that by itself is incomplete, unless until we can actually think about the framework and mental models that create sustained happiness. And then when I discovered was that all of us have these mental models. You have it, I have it, somebody else has it. How do we get them to share the mental models of happiness with in this, so it becomes a part of this platform, you would call it, right? So now we're going to have videos, we're going to have podcasts, we can have everything in it, right? Thrown in. Book is just one of the vehicles, but it's just that an happiness platform, right? One of my friends wanted to fund a company which just covers positive news every day, right? Because you open the papers, I stopped
Yeah.
reading in the morning because I don't think they are useful. I get the news that I want during the day, but I don't want to look at how many people became positive yesterday in Maharashtra, right? So now this guy wanted to fund, and I think these mental models have kept us positive, calm, happier, whatever it is, right? So my thing was, can I discover these mental models of people and then have a chance that I can share it, right?
Yeah, I think techniques and manipulations have a place for giving you day-to-day joy and living in a practical plane, and perhaps leading to a more fulfilling life. But I don't personally believe that the way, and I've tried all of this, right? Like the rest of us, we've all been on our own paths. I don't believe that shutting yourself from the news or manipulating the hell out of your body will lead to sustained happiness. Uh, it sets the stage for it, but it's the work you do after that that will lead to sustained happiness. And that is actually more important in my view because a lot of people don't even need to do the manipulation because genetically or from the way they are raised, they end up having that composition. Why are some people just naturally happy? They just have more higher levels of serotonin, right? You could say you got dealt a bad hand of cards, that's fine, but that's the truth. They just have higher levels of serotonin or ananda mind or whatever you want to call it. They're just blissful.
Yeah, they say 50% is genetic, 10% is circumstantial, and 40% is your mindset. So the manipulations that we talk about, mental models, all those things are actually 40% that you can control, which
Yep.
is significant if you look at it, right? But because our 50% is sorted, that's the reason we can even look at that 40% and try to improve it, right? Because if you were dealt a bad hand on that 50%, then God save us, right? Because
Yeah,
then
and when you say if we were dealt a bad hand in that 50%, we don't know that. I mean, you and I sitting here across, Zoom, uh, I don't know. I can't tell you. I don't know. Maybe you feel like you've got 40, 50% in terms of you've got a good hand dealt.
I've got a good hand.
Right.
100% sure I got a great hand. Yes, on
Yeah.
the
Right. It could be very different for different people. Even successful entrepreneurs don't necessarily have a good hand dealt as far as the base level happiness is concerned. A lot of people are driven by fear and anger, and they end up becoming successful entrepreneurs. Uh, so happiness is not all it takes to drive success. You will find in every sphere, at least in my view, that people can be driven by very different things and achieve great amounts of success and very high levels of success.
Well, I agree. So I remember what I wanted to do was there are few areas where I would love to understand your mental models. One of them actually concerns money and financial wealth, right? So, what are your thoughts, your relationship with it? What do you feel about it? How has it changed over the last 20 years of entrepreneurship, angel investing, etc., and just the mental model you have for it?
Yeah, so I'll start with let's talk about money. I'll start again with this fundamental sort of belief, an underlying uh, principle. Now, again, I don't know where it comes from. Like perhaps it comes from parenting, growing up, just naturally. The belief is that money will take care of itself, and that's a byproduct. And that's always been my belief. I have never known, even now, if you ask me how much money is in your bank, I can't tell you that. I have never known that. I spend as if there is enough in my bank account, even when I don't have it. I have been bankrupt twice, Vivek. I don't know if you know that. But I've actually lost everything after. So I started out very young. I lived in the US for almost 10 years. I rode the first dot-com wave. I made millions of dollars at a very young age, early 20s. I betted all that in the 2000 boom, and I lost everything. And I was in debt. No, didn't bother me for too long. Maybe a few weeks it troubled me, but my conduct was always as if those millions were still in that bank account in terms of how I spent, how I lived my life. Went again, built everything. Second time around, 2008 happened, got caught in an unforeseen and unfortunate set of circumstances, lost everything. Very, very difficult 2 years followed because I was in a lot of debt and, you know, one couldn't have seen those circumstances. So that was extremely tormenting. But once again, came out of it uh, with the belief that it'll take care of itself and money is a byproduct. And that if you just keep applying yourself, keep working, it'll take care of itself. Right? How my view has changed over the last few years through these experiences. One thing, I still believe that it'll take care of itself. But I do put in a little more effort now in terms of making things happen. So if there is an exit or if there is an opportunity to monetize something that I might have, I'm a little more deliberate about it. Right? It's not as much to gather that money in as much as it is to ensure that that event occurs and not just leave it to chance. So I think that's certainly changed for me over the years. But I still have that unshakable belief that the money part will take care of itself. I don't know if you watched the movie Forrest Gump. I think we all have. And I think Tom Hanks says in the movie when asked about money, and this is the second principle that I somewhere have or that kind of stayed with me. He said, well, it's one less thing to worry about. Right. So I think money is important from that standpoint. For a lot of lesser fortunate people who are dealing with the basics of survival, they cannot think beyond survival. Today we are sitting here, you and I, having this very interesting and elaborate conversation about happiness, and you're writing a book about happiness. Right? That's because you and I don't know what it is to be hungry.
Yeah.
Hunger, I don't know if you've ever experienced it, but I had the unfortunate situation to experience it. I don't want to get into that for a few days. And hunger can drive you to kill somebody. Literally, if you go hungry for 3 days, you'll be ready to kill half the people you say you love. Right.
But one of my friends, he lived on sustenance diet for almost 6 months. And he said that there were so many chemical changes in his body. So he gave a TED talk on that. That he said that so many times you see people fighting physically. He says this because that for six months, one year, I became that, right? So people who are starved from basic nutrition in a place like a country like ours, so you are just having, rice and roti, and you're not getting nutrition you want. So they chemically, they are, as you said, right? They're ready to kill people or
Yeah.
have a fight. And we would like, because we are privileged. We sometimes say, why would the guy be fighting on the road with the person who's crossed the road or whatever, XYZ, right?
Yeah.
But just imagine they are in that state of mind all their lives. They never had a good meal consistently for a 6-month period where nutrition wise the body got what the body wanted, right? So what you're saying is absolutely right. And as I said, right, that the physical needs of Maslow is something which no amount of philosophy can ever make somebody who has limitation of physical needs happy. But I'm just saying that
Ananda mind is does not substitute for food.
yeah, exactly, right?
So we do live in a physical plane, and you cannot I mean, maybe you can transcend that. I don't know, but I haven't seen it.
Yeah, exactly. So after that, what I said was that then we should not have reasons to be unhappy. Can we work on our happiness and muscles after the physical laws and needs are met, right? So that's where, obviously, that's the TG for the book and the platform, and at least we can get some. Uh, and as I said, right, it's like almost like a compass. Can some of these discussions give somebody a compass, something that sticks with them? They say, you know what, I heard Anupam say this, and it stuck with me because like this is all we need, right? So that
The
would
third
be a direction.
aspect about just wanted to add to that money question. Yeah, I think I said one was that underlying unshakable belief that it'll take care of itself, and I'm destined to have a lot of it. I don't know where it comes from. And you conduct yourself like you have a lot of it, even when you don't have it.
Yep.
So I don't know where that comes from. The second is it's one less thing to worry about. I think the third one is that money allows you to put, and this is slightly heavy, but it allows you to trigger a karmic cycle. When I say karmic cycle, to me, karma is very simple. It is fundamentally, as you sow, shall you reap. Karma is only actions. Karam karo matlab actions karo. Aap jo karoge, you will set in motion a set of reactions. And to me, money or having money allows you to create a karmic cycle that can be very interesting and liberating, not just for you, but the world at large. And I'm not saying that in any altruistic way or to be benevolent in any form, way, or fashion. I'm only saying it for you, for your own process. If you set that karmic cycle in motion, it'll just feel better and you'll be happier, right? So more from a selfish standpoint than any other altruistic standpoint.
Interesting. So one of the other things, in fact, I'd like to pick your brains more on the karma bit, because I think that's something which I've also believed in. So I won't say I'm religious or spiritual, but I feel that I just feel that it's privileged people like me who can say I'm spiritual but not religious, because that it's itself is a very thing. But the way I look at it is that there are certain beliefs that empower me, and there are certain beliefs that limit me. I don't care where the belief comes from. It may come from a religion, but if I can use that belief to empower myself, uh, then so be it. I'll share with you one interesting story. Uh, Basically, a person came to my house a year ago, and he basically told me about this concept of a soul. And for me, soul is mumbo jumbo, right? So I almost like, so I said, okay, let me see if my same empowering belief philosophy works or not. So he told me that the soul and body age is different. So you can live 30 years and your soul can age 5 years, and you can live 30 years and your soul could age 1,000 years.
Yep.
What do you achieve in that 30 years, right? So I thought to myself, I was like, you know what, this is a very empowering philosophy, that let's say, fortunately, we may live to 80 or whatever. I've lived half my life yet. In the next 40 years, can I age my soul 1,000 years? What do I need to do so that I can age my soul 1,000 years? And then I started looking at time differently, legacy differently, purpose differently. I went for a climate change thing last year for 10 days, where at least I said, I learned something which is going to impact a billion people in some ways, right? So I said that, okay, now I may not believe in Hinduism or religion or the concept of a soul, but just that one single thing, that can I age my soul more than what my body is aged in the last 24 hours, right? What have I done today that has aged my soul a bit more than my body's age? And with that in mind, I said, you know what? That's one thing I take. I don't care where it comes from. As you said, it can come from Forrest Gump saying something,
Yeah.
or somebody else, a child sharing something. It doesn't matter. All I want is that, okay, can I adopt that belief and make it a part of my mental model just because it empowered me? And however logical, rational it is, but if it limits me, I'll reject it. I don't care how, I was talking to a person and he said that, Vivek, I never signed documents on Saturday. So let me tell you why. I said, no, just wait. I don't want to listen to it. I have no problems with your belief.
Yeah.
I don't want to even hear the rational logic of it, because if I get convinced, it'll be a limiting belief for me. And I don't want to even listen to your rational for it, right? I don't want to listen to it. She said, no, let me just at least, no. I said, like, don't talk. Let me cut you down. You don't sign documents Saturday. Good for you. I'm going to respect your choice. So I'll obviously sign it because it involves you. So I'll sign it on Sunday or whatever day you find it good. But I don't want to listen to your rational why you want to do this. So for me, it's very easy when I talk to people. If it's something which is going to empower me, then I will listen to it. But if the concept of itself is limiting, like I don't sign documents on Saturday, then I don't want to even listen to your logic. So it's like it makes life very, very simple of
Yeah.
what you want to adopt in your life and what thing you don't want to adopt in
You
your life.
have to go with what works for you. But you said something interesting back there. I just wanted to mention that one just bring that up. You spoke about religion and spirituality. And to me, these are the same thing. These are means to an end. And what means you choose? So there's a very powerful word, right, in Indian context. Or if you think about now, it's global, really. But yoga. What is yoga? Yoga is unity. Yoga is the unity of mind, body, and soul. Fundamentally, that's what yoga means. Of course, people have now, some people think it means flexibility, some people think it means levitating, some people think it means meditation. Everybody has their own interpretation. But at a very fundamental level, yoga means this unity, right? This is yoga. This namaste, this is yoga. Right? And when you think about yoga being, if you start thinking about yoga being the end, right? Being one with the universe, being one with yourself. Then religion and spirituality, इसके नाम भी है हमारे पास, right? Bhakti yoga, Karam yoga. I think there are different forms, but ultimately these all lead to the same end. So some people who find it easy to have faith without questioning things, without introspecting too much, without challenging everything, Bhakti yoga is ideal for them. They will also get to where you are going. If you're the kind who is extremely skeptical, say ये गणेश जी कहाँ से आए, उनका सर किसने काट दिया, you struggle with all these things, then perhaps Bhakti yoga is not right for you. If you are the kind who has no problem doing his daily duties without questioning it, आप काम पे जाते हो, family का सब काम, Karam yoga. So I think spirituality is another, I forget the term for it, but I know there's a term for it, just like Bhakti yoga, Karam yoga, spirituality का भी एक term है. So that is another form. So it really, now I'm going back to what I was saying earlier. A lot of this comes down to self-awareness. One of the biggest tragedy of our existence, I believe, and this goes to the book that you're writing as well, of our modern education system and the way we are raising children, is we don't have a subject called self-awareness and emotional understanding. Before we teach our kids anything, we must be teaching them self-awareness. Most people are going through life unhappy because they're not able to make sense of their emotions. That's the fundamental problem. Right? When I talk to people, when I see my own example, right? And I'm not saying I have achieved that. I'm simply saying when I look at my own example, I've had the good fortune or some accidental incidents or crises or accidents or conflicts which have forced me to introspect and try to understand some of these things. A lot of people may not have that. A lot of people may not have the opportunity to do it. But a lot of people I interact with are struggling with their emotions. And so I think self-awareness and emotional quotient are subjects that should become part of core curriculum right from the time our kids join school. That's the big tragedy, I feel, of our modern existence.
But I think, so the way I look at happiness also from a spiritual angle is, right, that this baseline of 81, 82, if somebody can ever reach 100, right, I would say that will be equivalent to enlightenment. What it would
Would be
mean
equivalent to
enlightenment.
enlightenment, blissfulness, enlightenment, whatever you want.
Because what happens is that you may still go back to 90,
Yeah.
because unfortunate thing will happen, right? So you can never be 100 all the time, but your baseline is 100. 6 months, 1 year, you'll come back to 100 because that's your natural state. So the way I'm looking at this book is that, can you work on this as a muscle, that your 81 becomes 82, becomes 83. So you were taking your natural state to 83.
I will send you a letter I wrote to my niece when she turned 21, which touches upon some of this baseline stuff and natural stuff. And I was extolling her to look at, she struggles a little bit with emotion, and so it's extolling her to look at how a child's natural state is blissfulness. It is not agitation. Agitation is actually a very unnatural state for a human being.
Yeah.
Modern society and modern living has driven us there.
Yeah. In fact, along with the interview, I'm going to, if you allow me, I'll put the letter also there.
Yes,
along with the interview. So I think that's a good thing about.
It's a short letter, but it touches upon many of the things that you're talking about.
Sure. Okay. One other thing I wanted to cover, Anupam, was a lot of times I've seen that inherent trust in people or distrust in people creates a lot of happiness or unhappiness in yourself. So, I read this book called The Speed of Trust, 20 years ago. It was written by the son of Stephen Covey, the 7 Habits author. And it basically, what I could remember from the book 20 years ago was that, you can lead your life trusting everyone or not trusting anyone. When you trust everyone, there are 100 people you will have relationships, business with, and few of them may cheat you.
Yeah.
On the other end, you'll have relationships and business with only 10, 15 people, and probably nobody cheats you. But the total amount of whatever you will create in your life, from that 100 minus the 2 who cheated you, will still be much more than those 15. So you can live your life,
Yeah.
but you have to know your philosophies, because I think that's a very integral part of even angel investing to a certain extent, right? Because it's so much that goes into it. Like right now, I wrote my first check without meeting a person. I've never done that. So on a Zoom call, because I had, 6 months back, you asked me that when I ever hand over money without meeting a person physically for a coffee, I would have probably said no. But now I feel that we are probably used to it, but we're having this conversation. This conversation will be not very different having a coffee physically, right? Because we're comfortable with this video calling to a great extent, where we can almost build a little bit of trust with each other, even though the conversation is on Zoom.
So I think, this is very interesting point you raised about trust. And I'm going to say something quite contradictory to what you're saying, but only because I'm being pedantic. So let me just say it and then I'll explain. I think trusting everyone is a surefire way to being extremely unhappy. Right? And again, as I said, I'm being pedantic, so let me explain what I mean. I think trust as an absolute doesn't exist. You can't trust everyone for everything. So I don't trust my cook to drive me to work. And I trust him to make good food for me. I don't trust my driver to come home and cook for me. And I never will, because it'll give me a bad stomach, which will lead to unhappiness. Right? I love my wife. I trust her for many things, but I'd certainly not trust her to come in and run my company. Right? It'll give me a lot of unhappiness. Right? I trust certain friends for certain things. I trust certain friends for other things. So I think over time you develop confidence in people's ability and you trust them for different things. So I think it's very important to not treat trust as an absolute, because we often do that. Again, this comes from perhaps just the way we are conditioned, but we use the word very loosely. And we say, "Arey, you don't trust anyone. Arey, aap to sabko trust karte ho." I think it's a lot more nuanced than that.
No, so actually,
So
Anupam,
having said, sorry, go ahead.
So actually, the way I look at it, right? So when I say I trust everyone, doesn't mean that I'm going to publish my banking password online and then the whole world has access to my funds because I trust everyone, right? So trust is very simple. When I trust everyone, right? My thinking is I trust everyone's intent. At no point of time when a person talks to me, I would, in my mind, never cross my mind that this person could have another agenda
Sure.
than what he's talking to me about.
I think fundamentally what you're saying is you start with the belief of goodness in people.
Yeah.
You start with the view, not guilty until proven guilty, as a court of law should also be, as opposed to be the other way around, that you start with a cynicism about people. And you start with wondering, this guy is after XYZ or cynicism, as I said. So I think that's very, very valid. And I agree. I think a lot of long-term thinkers, people who play the long game, people who have an inherent unshakable confidence in the universe, and now you can say trust. Now I bring in the word trust. When I trust the universe, I fundamentally start with believing in the goodness of people, right? Because you cannot trust the universe and not trust the person.
Yeah.
There's an inherent conflict in that, because that either tells me you don't understand what you're saying, or that you're very confused. Right?
And I think this concept, which is very, very common in India, is this whole concept of log kya kahenge, right? Where you almost build up, this person has done this could be his intent about it, and the reason he's done this, he's expecting me to do this for him later. That's the reason. And then you're playing this dialogue, right? So a lot of times I have conversations, I say like, I can just take it today. This person has given me a gift and I'm thankful for it. And that's about it, right? Because the funny part is, so many times we have discussions, especially with my spouse more often than others, where it's almost like nobody thinks about us, right? Everybody thinks about themselves. So nobody is actually bothered.
What happens though, this trust thing is very interesting. Even if you are fundamentally that type of person who believes in the goodness and you trust people, life's experience, and particularly for an entrepreneur who's engaged in commercial activity and business, and this goes back to what you were saying, a lot of these things are muscles, right? Because every day you're exercising the muscle of negotiating with people, of being a skeptic, of being a cynic, of getting the best deal out of things, out of somebody, for your company, for yourself. You keep exercising that muscle, and that starts to transcend in everything that you do. Right? Slowly, slowly, that fundamental belief in people's goodness starts to move into how do I get the best out of this conversation. So this takes a lot of practice. It takes a lot of work. Or if you're innately blessed with being able to compartmentalize things and separate these two and switch these roles, then that's different. But otherwise, these can start bleeding into each other. So you really have to be careful, I believe.
Yeah, because I've seen that, generally, I'm honestly, right, I have people who have taken loans from my company, not paid back, whatever XYZ, right? I could have these 100 grudges against some people. But I've never felt that ever, right? I still have great relations with them. Would I give them a loan again? No, I won't, right?
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean that I'm going to doubt their intent on anything else. Like, if you ask me, right, one of the lesser known facts is, right, in 2008, when the deal fell through with Aegis Media and Dentsu, it was almost like leaving the bride at the altar. But then after that, in 2012, I still sold my company exactly to them. In hindsight, is the best thing that happened to me. If I had even 0.1% of grudge, then that deal would have not happened. But yeah, time around, I waited for money to come in the bank before they announced it to the press. I didn't have any pre-launch party without receiving the monies. Would I slightly, so you learn from experiences. But at the end of the day, if I were in their place, right, their market cap has gone down by 50%. That point of time, there were a lot of bigger problems they had to solve. So if I were them, I would have taken exactly the decision they took, right? So I will not. So when they came back to me, I wouldn't say, oh, you were not fair to me in 2008, right? Because see, my thing is that if you can keep the emotions out of it, then it's easier to have slightly more happier, content lives, because then you don't care about what happened with that person in the past.
Let's talk about that. That's a very interesting thing that you touched upon, emotion. You want to spend a few minutes talking about that?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So this is something that has tormented me for a very long time. I was telling you about self-awareness. We were talking about teaching self-awareness. And because we were never taught this in school, and it was certainly not something in my family growing up where my parents were saying you have to be self-aware. I don't think it was for most Indian kids. We were just grown up to say, do well in school, whatever. If your father had a business, you join your dad's business. And there wasn't that much conversation around, being in tune with your feelings. So I've actually had to spend several years starting to become self-aware. And whether that was therapy, counseling, reading, whatever that journey was, crisis, conflict, perhaps I seeked out the conflict because it would make me self-aware, right? The subconscious is a very powerful thing. It makes you do stuff that you don't realize until later. But through that journey, I found a framework. Right? That's very, very interesting. For me, it's been very liberating, and it helps me with decision making. It helps me with calibrating my chemicals, if you will, in the body. It helps me put things into perspective. A lot of it has to do with emotion. What tormented me earlier was these four forces that we all have at play, and how we're unable to, a lot of times, at least in my case, I was unable to, is distinguish between them and put them into perspective. And so we are conflicted between these forces, and we are struggling with how to make sense of any event that occurs in our life. And the four forces really, one is emotion, right? So anything that happens triggers an emotional reaction. Right? One is rational, rationale, which is your intellect or your logical thinking, if you will, rationally what makes sense. The other is, of course, conditioning. You've been grown up, or you've been raised, and you've grown up with listening to certain things over and over again. It should be done like it should be done like that. It should be done. And I would venture to say more than half of you is conditioning, and me, right? And everyone. Right? And we don't ever question it because it's so deeply conditioned. Right? And the fourth is ego. Right? The fourth force is ego. Now, whenever you're faced with a decision, or you're faced with any incident or event, all these four forces come into play in some proportion. And most of us are not equipped to separate them and to start to understand which one is at play. So when it comes to a business decision, right, ideally, you want to make a rational decision. You don't want to make an emotional decision. You don't want to make an ego-led decision unless you deliberately want to, which in some cases makes sense. You might want to. You don't want to make a conditioned response unless you deliberately decide to. So when it comes to a decision for your child, right, let's say you decide that you want to be home every day at 5 p.m. Now that's an emotional decision that you made, which might cost you something in your business. But you have deliberately made an emotional decision saying, I want to do that emotionally for my child. There may be no rationale, there's no ego at play, perhaps no conditioning, but it's a choice you made driven by that particular compartment. So I think it's very important to start putting that in perspective. So it took me a lot of practice. I started to take the big decisions that came my way. I actually built a spreadsheet. And even today, when it comes to some big decisions, I do that. But for the smaller things, it now become natural to me. It's become sort of second nature, where very quickly my mind is able to process, how am I reacting here? What's the emotional trigger? Is ego coming in the way? Is this rational? What conditions are playing? What conditioning is starting to come up in the mind that idealistically you should do this, you should do that, you shouldn't do that. And so the mind is able to sort it out very quickly. And that framework has helped me a lot. And because you started talking about emotion, I just thought, I'd sort of just surface it and put it for discussion. So yeah, that was pretty much.
Okay, Anupam, I think you covered a very interesting point, and this is something which I also feel probably a little diverse from the book point of view, but there's so many skill sets that all of us have learned through our own experiences, whether they're decision making, whether they're time management, and surprisingly, right, none of this is taught to kids. Right? There is no formal education, even for time management, right?
Absolutely.
Right? And the thing is that it's sad that even like something like this Shane Parrish course on decision making, I've just done 4 weeks out of 12 weeks. I'm telling you, a lot of things that you should do instinctively, where I'm actually taking decisions.
You should send me that. I'd love to look up that decision making thing. I'd check it out.
Just 1 second. One second.
Oh, no worries.
So I'm interviewing Anupam Mittal, but you can sit and listen to it. So I'll just introduce you to my daughter also.
Hi.
Hi.
Hey, nice to meet you. How are you?
Sit. Yeah. So I think I'll send that to you. It's a very, very interesting course. In fact, both me and Ishika are doing it together.
How fantastic.
So what I've seen also is that I think learning things together, so it creates this. Even when decision making is done, we were supposed to go for a small holiday, and this concept talks about consequential and irreversible decisions. And I said, okay, you know what?
Yeah.
This is going to be consequential and it's going to be irreversible. So we've already invested 110 days staying at home. For that 3 days or 5 days of fun, I don't think we should take this decision. And there is no way to make this inconsequential or reversible. So that's the reason. So when I explained it that way, the disappointment of not going for a holiday was reduced to a great extent because of the course.
So more than decision making, it should be called how to find marital bliss.
That's true. Okay, one other concept that I have, at least for me, is learning new things and growing as a person uh, increases my happiness. And I feel that that's something which I almost have a fetish for learning. But I've seen that.
Yeah, I've seen that about you, Vivek. You're constantly, whenever I talk to you, and we must interact some more because just this conversation alone, and whenever I talk to you, I'm always learning a lot because you're constantly writing a book or doing stand-up comedy or learning about decision making. So it's amazing to me that you're able to do all this.
This is like a lot of people have asked me, "तू काम भी करता है नहीं करता है?" Yeah. So actually, the interesting part is, right, one of the things that I learned from this guy called Dan Sullivan. He's a 70-year-old guy. He does these quarterly courses. So it's one workshop, one day, every quarter, and people have been doing this with him for 25 years.
Vivek, can I just take 1 minute, just a bio break?
Yeah, of course. Yes, sir. Recording is started again.
Yeah. How much more time do we need?
So I think we have just this learnability is one area that I want to cover, and other is from a long-term point of view, the purpose bit of it. If you have something to share, you have.
Sure.
So would love to know your thoughts on this learnability thing, because the way I've looked at it is that I have a certain core function, right? I may be an entrepreneur, maybe a leader, a digital marketeer, a digital consultant. But what I've seen is when I learn more and more things, all these dovetail into making me better at what I do. So if I learn stand-up comedy, then it allows me to become a better speaker when I speak, or actually make people laugh in a party, so create a more better rapport with people. But if I learn mentalism, it allows me to create higher recall, because I meet a person and the person, I wanted to introduce somebody to the CEO of, let's say, Big Basket, but I'd met her at Shasha's party because I had guessed her password. She never forgot me, right? So I got that introduction because I have higher recall value because of mentalism. So all the different things, when I did a news anchoring course, they allowed me to be slightly better off than what I would have been on that show that we were together, which was a disaster. But I hope you've forgiven me. But so the thing is that what I see it, when you learn new things, it actually improves you, right? So it becomes, it's not the way I'm looking at it that I'm ever going to become a magician who will perform on stage. But will it help me increase my recall value in the sales funnel when I meet a bunch of people over the next 10, 20, 30 years? I think it will. So, and the objective is not to do that. So it's almost karma. The joy is in the learning. But what I've seen over the period of time is that it's actually helped me become a
brilliant. That's amazing. That's brilliant.
So would love to know your thoughts. Because I know you also read a lot and do this, but I would love to have your thoughts. If you have any mental makeup model for.
Yeah, look, I mean, I'll be honest with you. If I trace my own journey of learnability, initially, when you're just starting out, maybe in my teens and 20s, there is just this insatiable appetite for grasping and learning everything. And I think even, you just jump into things. You don't think much. You don't contemplate much. You see something interesting, you like it, you just jump into it, right? And I was voracious in terms of trying to imbibe all the good business and strategy practices. And I was I think it really helped me start out as an entrepreneur and build out some of the things that I earlier did. But somewhere along the way, when I look back, that very success became a bit of baggage. Right? The expectation around became that, he knows everything, and comes back to those four forces: ego, conditioning, emotion, rationale. And somewhere ego and conditioning started playing up. And my own expectation of myself became, oh, I know everything. And I think along the way, I may have sort of lost that edge of becoming this learner. In fact, I became quite the opposite, to be honest with you. Learnability completely disappeared. Anything new, I would simply shut down because I felt threatened that I didn't know it. And instead of looking at it as an opportunity to learn and enjoy learning, I felt that, oh my God, another thing to do. And I have to now process this whole damn thing and learn, this. And it made me feel insecure and threatened. So I think there was a period of time where learning anything new became a bit of a struggle, and I became very difficult to deal with as a person because I had to pretend like I knew it, but I actually didn't know anything. And I struggled with admitting to other people that I didn't know it. So that to me was a bit of a journey and introspection that I went through last few years. And I think came around to understanding that learnability is really a function of humility. And if you're not humble, uh, learnability is very, very difficult. And actually, all these things overlap. So then you might start asking, where does humility come from? Right? And humility comes from understanding your place in the universe. Where does that come from? That comes from meditation and spirituality, if you want to call it that. When you start contemplating the universe, when you meditate, it's very, very hard not to realize your insignificance. When you realize your insignificance, humility is a natural byproduct.
It's very ironic. My daughter does meditation using the Muse headset, and she's very proud that she's able to remain calm for 99%. And she's almost saying that this is the best record of Muse ever. So it's actually, she's learning complete opposite of humility from meditation.
News? Did you say news? She's contemplating news?
No, there is a Muse headset, you wear it and actually measures meditation. So it defeats the purpose of meditation, but it's awesome.
Oh,
Because
wow.
it creates the addictiveness of doing it more often. So I end
Yeah.
up doing it more often than ever. I do about half an hour every day with Muse.
What is it called? Muse?
Muse, Muse.
M-U-S-E. Okay, got
It's an awesome device. Huh? So
Muse.
digressing from the thing, but she's sensei. So Vishal Gundal does it every day.
Yeah.
The same device, and Vishal, let's say, gets 150 birds when you do when it's really calm. The birds chirp.
Yeah.
Like she's able to get 177, which is just crazy. So I'll send you one of the graphs of her when she is meditated. It's almost like she's sensei. It's like probably I've never seen anybody as calm as her. So I said
Well, I think age also has some. How old is your daughter?
17.
70. So she's, again, we were talking about chemical composition and hormones. She's got that going for her.
Probably. So one last thing I wanted to cover, Anupam, is that I think all of us have made a little bit of wealth, and from a sustained happiness point of view, I found this common with some people where they have sense of whether it's purpose for their own companies, purpose in long term, or even like whether you would call it legacy, right? Does that anywhere come in your life? Does it drive you in any ways? Anything that you've thought of on the CSR bit of it, or anything which is beyond what we are doing today? Like for me, it's table tennis, right? So I want to create an Olympic medalist out of India and contribute whatever I can for it. So whether I own a team, I've set up 4 academies, but after talking to Rajesh, I want to set up an institution of table tennis. So
That's amazing. That's great. That's great. Look, I think purpose is very, very important. But I want to sort of put it a little bit in context, or at least the way I have thought about it, right? And it's changed over time, as these things should. Initially, I felt, and again, the same forces I play, conditioning and this and that. Initially, I felt that purpose is something that you are uniquely you, and you figure out your big purpose on this planet and go put a dent in on the earth and so on. But over time, I begin to realize that that's very arrogant, right? And as you become meditative and a little spiritual, if you want to call it that, and contemplate the universe, you realize that you can put no dent in anything. Right? The only dent you'll end up with is one in your head if you try to put a dent on the universe or on the earth, right? So then I started thinking of purpose a little differently. And to me, again, all these things tie up very neatly and overlap with each other. But purpose to me is really about direction, right? And why do you need direction? You need direction because you have limited time, right? We can get into a whole different conversation about time and whether it's real or not, but let's just keep that out of the scope of this. But looking at it from a very practical standpoint or from an existential standpoint, time is very important because you have very limited time. It's the only thing that everybody is limited by. So if you have limited time, then speed becomes important, right? And what is speed? Speed is fundamentally velocity times direction. So if you want speed, or if you want to make the most of your existence on this planet, right, in terms of the way we see it at a practical level, I'm not talking about the spiritual journey right now, then I think purpose becomes very important. Because without purpose, you're going to end up in a lot of different directions, which will take away from speed, which will take away from anything that you're trying to do. And so I think it's important from that standpoint. Having said that, the other thing that I am now getting comfortable with is I don't need to have one overarching purpose. Right? So I have a purpose right now, but that purpose might be very different 2 years from now or 3 years from now. Right? But at any given time, I want to have a purpose. And if I don't, then I want to be very comfortable with saying I don't have a purpose right now, which is also okay. So my purpose might very well be not having a purpose. But I think just spelling it out like that gives you direction. And I think direction gives you focus, gives you speed.
Interesting. I think I learned quite a few new things in this conversation. And actually, I never expected this kind of knowledge on spirituality, and even that those 4 things. I think when I take decisions, I'm going to ask myself, are they rational? Are they emotional? Are they driven by my ego or conditioning? I think that should be part of that decision-making course. I'm going to send it to you, but yeah. I think I can almost see adopting this framework that you shared. Because so many times, what happens, you're taking a decision and you're taking a quick decision and unnecessarily complicating it because of emotion or ego or conditioning, while it's a very rational, easy decision to take. So I think just having that one single clarity that I've received from this interview is going to be definitely very, very useful to me in so many things that I do in life, right? So
no, I got a lot out of this as well. I mean, conversations like that, which are freewheeling, which contemplate the bigger issues in life, something that we all can relate to, identify with, struggle with, I think always open up doors that we didn't know existed when you went in having the conversation. So thank you for that. I really enjoyed it, and I'm going to pick your brain on the few of the things that you're doing. I made notes you might have noticed while we were talking. Yes. So you should expect a flurry of emails or what's that?
Not an issue, my friend. Yeah, I have actually a couple of ideas that I'll pick your brains on also. I'm just going to stop the recording first.
Sure.